We started the It's Great to Be Alive series in response to my clear awareness that we needed a vehicle by which we could let people know that the disease of alcoholism and chemical dependency was rampant in our country, that it affected people of all levels of society, and that it was something that could be treated and recovery could be resolved from that. And television and the series became the means by which that was possible.
The mid-70s was a time of transition in the fight against alcoholism and chemical dependency. For the first time, highly visible people chose to fight the stigma and talk candidly about their addictions to someone who knew what they'd been through. Glenn Jorgensen, himself in recovery, ran a treatment center in South Dakota. When he shared his idea for a special half-hour public service program with others, he was told by many that it couldn't be done. But he persevered and surprised even himself with the nationwide success of It's Great to Be Alive.
How do you get a Johnny Cash or a Betty Ford or a Leonard Firestone or Art Linkler, those people to either come to South Dakota or sit down wherever you might go to do these shows without any pay? They're not, you have to be able to get to them. And then when you get to them, because you've got a good thing going and because you've got good friends, and then you have to have good staff who are willing to go beyond just standing behind a camera or whatever and become involved and make the celebrity feel like they're a part of a good winning team and turn out a good product, and then they're glad they did it, and others are willing to share and do the same thing.
The only difference between me and a Skid Row bum was I had a nice house to be a Skid Row bum in,
It's a great equalizer, isn't it? Doesn't make a difference where you sobered up at.
Well, I had an alcoholic's paradise. I had a nice house, a nice white house on the top of a hill, and it had a whole cellar full of whiskey, and I had a maid who was paid to like me, and I had a dog. The dog loved me because I was in bed all the time, and that was, he'd never been allowed on the bed that long.
And I had 7 years of constant habituation or addiction. I think my psychiatrists like to say habituation.
Yeah, I think that's
I mean, it was cold, hard addiction, devotion. I mean, it was devotion to what I was doing. It was amphetamines, barbiturates, and alcohol, all three in a cycle for 7 years.
And while I had my denial, my family had their denial too. Perhaps that was because of the image I was to them. I was a mother, I was a wife, I was what they looked to be, a grandmother, the grandmother to their children. And that's a very close personal thing. So for me to be an alcoholic was not acceptable.
I was in Dallas, Texas, and an awful thing happened to me and these people I was with. We ran out of dope. It was an awful thing.
The
Terrible
supply
thing.
was gone.
It was gone. We had given checks. We had been to the 24-hour teller. Everybody had spent all the money that they had on them and could write checks for, and we ran out of dope. And it was the first time for a 3-day weekend that I'd ever freebased, first and last time that I'd freebased cocaine. And it was the worst, it was the lowest moment of my life. I was crawling around on the floor in Dallas, picking up lint out of a carpet, trying to put it in a freebase pipe. That's how devastated I was.
That the individual often is afraid what's going to happen if people know.
What will they say?
What will they say? And I can't let anybody know. They might go to a recovery program, and somebody might see me there, And it's a part of the disease. It's a part of the denial because it's not true. And it's just another way of avoiding coming to terms with your drinking problem.
They have the power. Celebrities have a unique power that they need to use for good, and some of them do, some of them don't. Our celebrities have used what they have for a good purpose of reaching people, because people will pay attention to them.
And for a moment, the first euphoric moment or two upon use, it makes you feel like everything's all right. But you cannot see the spiral that you begin on when you take your first sniff, when you snort that first line, when you take that first hit on your freebase pipe. You cannot see the spiral that's heading downward. It seems to be going up, but if one put it on a curve, on a chart, on a graph, you would make that first hit high, and then when you come off of it, you go lower than you ever were.
When you're using drugs, you're taking a chance you don't need to take, because the fun you get out of it, A, isn't worth the risk you take, and B, it isn't as good as it's going to be. Each time you use it, it's a little less fun, and you have to use a little more drugs. It's absolutely known fact. So you're on a way towards having something grab you.
I try to tell the kids that there's only one reason that the pusher's around. You don't have one message, one goal. He wants your money. That's all he wants, nothing else.
When we did the People of Prison segment of our show, I was looking for another side to balance the celebrity end of this effort that we were making. And by going inside the prisons and showing that people there came also from all walks of life, that a large percentage of them were there because of alcohol and drugs, and that they had many of the same feelings as the person sitting in the big mansion out in California, we really, I think, made a big step in showing that this is a disease that knows no levels. It affects every level of society, from the most successful, the best, the most well-known, down to the lowest of the low.
All I can say is that I do know that alcohol and drugs are very, they unmanage your life.
An inmate during his life, before he ever comes to this institution, is running from one thing or another at all times. And eventually ends up hiding in the bottle. And the bottle takes over. And it's not just the inmates in the institution, there's people out there the same way. So they make their own prison out there. It might not have bars, but they're in a prison.
The success of the adult children efforts that we have made are directly related to the growing awareness that when you have grown up in or lived in a family where alcoholism is prevalent, that you are affected very, very deeply and negatively, and that you have to recognize that this is what has happened. Well, so you got millions of people out there who have grown up in homes of alcoholism, who are wondering what's happening in their lives, and then they tune in and they hear Brooke Shields tell about what happened between her and her mother, or Susan Sullivan tell about what occurred in her home with her father. And bang, they say, hey, this is what's been going on in my life. At first, was it a little scary, or?
It was terrifying. First of all, a person has to realize that they are not alone, that they're not the only one feeling this or going through this, that the only way to help is to act and do something about it. And it was, I had my mom's bag packed, I had tickets ready, I had reservations made, and here I was telling someone who had always planned my life for me, what to do. And but it was extremely effective, and it was that step that initiated the whole process.
Children suffer major losses being raised in a chemically dependent family, but their losses are not always in reference to the alcoholic person. They suffer as much loss in reference to a non-alcoholic parent. What happens for them is as my alcoholic spouse becomes more and more preoccupied with the need to drink, I, that partner, become more and more preoccupied with the alcoholic, to the point that I can't attend to my own needs consistently, nor the needs of my children. And I work with a lot of kids who feel guilt for just being alive, that somehow they feel responsible for the tension, the arguing, the sadness that's going on in that home. And Glenn, what I think people don't understand is that we find that in children by the time they're 9 years of age. I find that children by the time they're 9, in any alcoholic home, typically have a denial system that is sophisticated as that as the chemically dependent person will have.
Denying that there is a problem in the home?
They sometimes don't deny even the drinking, but they certainly deny how they feel about what it is that's going on, and they certainly deny their own perceptions.
How do you feel about your father now?
I've always loved my father. And certainly I feel as if I have forgiven him. It's hard to say. The person I haven't forgiven is myself.
the people that I've had the good fortune to work with have universally been good, likable, common people, if you will. Not what I thought I might run into, prima donnas and egomaniacs. Just people who have a talent for entertaining or a talent for being leaders, but also a desire to be a part of the solution to the problems that we face.
I don't think I can stand still as a human being now. And I don't want to. The whole excitement and adventure of life to me now is growing as a person. And since I've become sober, there's so many things that I have, fears that I have overcome, things that I have accomplished that I never thought I was capable of accomplishing. Relationships with other human beings that I never thought I was capable of. Life is growing that way for me, and I think that's it. Plus, I have the image I have of myself is that at the very bottom I have a basis of happiness and of joy that comes from within myself that cannot be changed or disturbed by any external circumstances at all.
When a family reaches you and says, what can we do to help the alcoholic, that is such a plus because that family has now recognized it, you see. But more than likely, they've been living in this unhappy situation up to 7 years. That's about the time. Don't you find that true? Yeah. That they finally reach the breaking point themselves and call out for help. So that is wonderful that they're coming to you. And then, of course, you can explain to them that there is nothing that they can do to make that person stop drinking. But there's an awful lot they can do for themselves.
You don't realize that you're an alcoholic. What are there, 15% of us that drink are alcoholics, something like that. And if you're one of them, you might as well face it. And you have to face it if you have some other disease. I'm not ashamed of it. I used to think there was a stigma. I think there are many people, Betty Ford, for instance, has taken a lot of stigma out of it. And doctors have agreed that it's a disease. So I'm not ashamed of it at all. I'm unhappy that I got that disease, but I can do something about it.
I've respected you for a decade. I know the good work you're doing, and I want to say to anybody that's listening, if there's anything you can do to help my friend and his wonderful work, I couldn't endorse it strongly enough. Thank you for all the lives you're saving and the reconstruction you're giving to an awful lot of people.
Through the years, Dr. Robert Schuller and countless others have given special attention and serious consideration to the It's Great to Be Alive project, a unique effort with the singular goal of helping people to healthier and happier lives. The purpose has always been one of rehabilitation, to touch that one hurting person, convincing them to pick up the phone and start the journey back to a life worth living.